Hello everybody. I really want to title this particular video Thoughts on Sonship. Now, when we're looking at the story of Bathsheba, if my hypothesis is correct, and Bathsheba was really on her way to sonship, and that when she committed adultery with King David, um, you know, she lost her sonship. But God gave it back to her through her son, Solomon. And we see a kind of redemption happening with her. So, one of the things that this really tells us about sonship is that sonship isn't really just about one particular individual. It's also about mothers and fathers and spouses. It is about the community that surrounds us. And if I, as an individual, make it to sonship, it isn't just going to affect me. It's actually going to affect every single person in my sphere of influence. So that means that this is incredibly serious. And one of the reasons why it's so serious is because sonship is a very, very specific place. It's a very dangerous place if you're not ready for it. It's a place of favor, privilege, and power. And so if you have one particular person who is a son and they are dragging every single person that they are connected to on one level or another into this particular sphere, there could be issues if there is one or two people in that sphere, or 10 or 20 in that particular sphere that can't handle sonship. And I really believe that the promises of God have a lot to do with this particular problem, you could call it. Obviously, there are incredible promises, like, for example, King David, with this promise of this covenant of love and this sort of, kingship, and eventually the Messiah would come out of the line of King David. There are a lot of really beautiful, general promises that were given to King David. But you can receive a lot of different kinds of promises, and a lot of the different promises that God is really giving to you is in order to deal with the problem of association. So God has one way of switching one player out with the next. So if you have a father who cannot reach sonship because there is something wrong with him, then God will try to switch that player out with a different player. If if you have a mother who cannot, for whatever reason, reach sonship because it would be too dangerous for her, God will switch that player out with another player. If you have a spouse who cannot reach sonship for whatever reason, then God will switch that player out with the next. And he does this in a lot of different kinds of ways. And some of the ways that a person who is very godly or very righteous, how they're being treated or handled by the people in their life can often really reveal that God is trying to make a maneuver of sorts to bring the one person into sonship without destroying the people that they're connected with too much, because sometimes people can get too much. So this is really, really important when it comes to dealing with adultery, justice, judgment, and so on and so forth. And when you look at, say, for example, Bathsheba, when she was given this crowned king and a son, not just the gender a son, but the sort of office son through birth, I really believe that was heaven saying that there was something, how can I say this? because I think that God always gives us second chances, and he always does beautiful things for us. So I think that he can always give us a redemption no matter what. But I really believe that redemption has a lot to do with an unfair or unjust happening in our life, where something goes beyond our control, or something that we could even really help. And so God brings a redemption of kinds into the picture in order to fix it. So there are all kinds of things that are happening, and I really so thankful that heaven is in charge of that, because heaven knows a lot better than we do. And some of the ways that when we run into a person, or when a person runs into us, or God gives us a certain mission with somebody, I mean, very, very often he is building the scene in order to bring you into the place that he's really wanting to take you. And sometimes he does have to take out a player. If there is a person in your life, you can really, really tell the people who cannot make it to sonship. Or they could, because it's open and offered to everybody. But there are very specific things about a person that will absolutely guarantee that God will not allow them to make it to sonship. And that is, the more they're trying to stop other people from coming into their promises, the more a person is accusing, the more a person is slandering, the more people are competing with other people. All of these particular factors are almost a guarantee that you are not ready for sonship, and God will possibly have to take you out of whoever the son or the coming son. If you are stopping that from happening, then God will have to switch you out with somebody else. And of course, the sign is bitterness and unforgiveness. Just the way we see that in Absalom. When Absalom was really interested in subverting and usurping the authority and kingdom of King David, we see that manifesting through bitterness and unforgiveness towards his father. Because bitterness and unforgiveness is really us trying to find a justification for stealing what's not ours. And so this is very, very bad. And so ambitions will be buffered. And really, the players in our life that refuse to forgive, that refuse to support our walk with God, the people who are constantly trying to shove us down in our life, whether it is a mother or a father or a spouse or a friend, God will eventually remove those and replace those. So this is very, very important. And it's also very, very important to hold on to those people that God tries to hook you up with, because very often he's saying, hey, this person isn't so good for you, but I want to bring this person because they will be good for you. They are going to help you reach not only sonship, but the destiny that I have prepared for you. And so even whenever we get really mad or offended at a person because we're sure that that person isn't really good for us for whatever reason, we have to really be careful when we do that. Because some people, even if they're like a hot mess in our life, sometimes God has them there for a specific reason, sometimes to buffer us in ways that we don't even understand, or sometimes to give us a quality that will help balance out our own qualities. So because we're all influencing each other and we're all connected to each other on some level. So sonship is really, really, really precious and special. And the more sons there are, the more stability will be in the world. And I personally believe that wholeheartedly. And, once again, I believe that it is the darkness of mankind to try its hardest to stop people from entering into sonship, that we can all struggle with this darkness and this competition. And the more we do so, the more we fall out of sonship and the more we fall away from the promised land. And also, too, for anybody who is going towards the promised land, if you box yourself in with thinking, well, this is my mother, this is my father, this is my spouse, this is my brother, this is my sister, Therefore, it must be God's will that all this stuff happens with this specific person and this specific relationship. That is not always the case. Sometimes God absolutely has to replace a person in one way, shape, or form or another because they cannot handle that sonship themselves. And there are plenty of people who are really trying to reach sonship themselves, really obeying God, and they are hooked up with a spouse who constantly beats them down with unforgiveness, resentment, and bitterness, and really tries to lock them in a prison through unforgiveness, which basically, yeah, it's horribly tragic. It's very, very foolish. I don't think that there is any price that would be worth trying to hold a son back, but there are lots of spouses who do so. And so sometimes God has to put somebody in that position or in a specific role that's not really traditionally theirs because that person cannot handle it. And like I said, that's true for mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and friends and everything else. So be good to your people and forgive.